Well, hello everyone, and we want to welcome you into our Christian Court program. We do it every 2 weeks here on the Six Screens Telenetwork. We're going to go to question number 2. So let's start off by saying body modification, including piercing, tattooing, scarring, branding, cutting, and outright mutilation, has been an increasing trend in recent years. Body piercing, the insertion of jewelry in various body parts, has graduated from the traditional earlobe piercing to the piercing of noses, navels, nipples, tongues, eyebrows, cheeks, genitalia, and more. Many Christians have a piercing or two, and some have many more than two. Scott, you see the question. The question, of course, is, should a Christian have body piercings?
Well, I would say a Christian may have piercings or tattoos, but I would not say should. It is a matter of conscience. We read in the scripture, 1 Corinthians 10, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. That's the verses 23 and 24. So we're no longer under the law because of what Jesus did, but we are led by the Spirit, and the Spirit will never lead you to do evil or to tear down rather than build up. So then when we look back in Leviticus 19:28, there's a prohibition there given to the people of Israel under the law of Moses. It said, you shall not make any cuts on your body for the dead or tattoo yourselves. Why were the people of Israel told not to cut, not to tattoo themselves? God wanted the Israelites to be different from the surrounding culture, to not engage in the same practices so that they would look different and so that they wouldn't fall into idolatry by identifying with those other cultures. So they were to be, God's people was to be set apart or holy. Holy means different, set apart, unlike the surrounding cultures, unlike the world system, which is in rebellion against God. So while the Mosaic law no longer applies, yet there are some principles that we could still learn from that. Christians are still to be holy and set apart and act different than the culture. So if someone were asking me, hey, should I get this tattoo or this piercing, whatever, I would be asking them from a biblical standpoint, what's the reason you want to do this? Is it to fit in, to look like the surrounding culture, to be more like the world, or is it to glorify God in some way? Is it edifying? Is it upbuilding? Is it seeking the good of your neighbor somehow, or is it seeking your own good? God is worried about our intentions sometimes more than our actions. Of course, actions matter. And later in that same passage of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, it says that I mentioned earlier, it says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. So can a tattoo glorify God? Yes, it can. There are missionaries who become all things to all people in order to fit in with a particular culture. In some rare cases, it would be respectful, again, with the permission of the indigenous culture. If you say, is it okay if I get one of these tattoos that it's so important to your culture? You might do that, or a piercing. There was a well-known missionary, Hudson Taylor, who dressed in Chinese clothing and wore his hair in the Chinese style to be a missionary to China, to show respect to the people. And Paul said, I've become all things to all people, so that I might by all means save some. So there's some ways that you might have tattoos that glorify God. Another one that I heard about, I remember this was interesting. When I read Stephen Baldwin's biography, he's an actor, one of the Baldwin brothers. He mentioned that by the way, a Christian. And he mentioned he's a part of the skater community, people who skateboard, and tattoos were a big thing among those people. So because he was part of that culture, he got tattoos, even though he was a Christian, so that he'd have more opportunities to witness. He would fit in with that culture. So I could see that's a way that a tattoo would be done for the glory of God. And the last example I want to give is something from my own personal experience. When I was at a church back in Texas, my wife and I went to visit the youth group, and there I met a really smart young lady, a young Christian lady, and she and I talked. Now, at the time, because of what was happening by ISIS persecuting Christians in the Middle East, I was wearing a pin that had the Arabic letter Noon on it, kind of looks like a one-eyed smiley face, and as a support and solidarity with the Christians who were being persecuted in the Middle East. And I think she may have asked about it, and I explained that the letter N in Arabic stands for Nasrani, which means Christian, and I was wearing it in solidarity with these people. Well, she went off to a school, probably, I don't know, college or something like that. I saw her several months later, maybe over a year, and she showed me she had a tattoo of this letter Noon. It was in a very discreet place. I think it was on the back of her arm. But I was kind of shocked that I had so much influence on this young lady just by telling her the story of where I was wearing the pin. But she was doing this also to represent and then to be in solidarity with the Christians who were persecuted. And that, again, is something that can be done to the glory of God. And of course, with that younger generation, tattoos are far more acceptable. So now this is one of those issues that's not terribly important. God has much bigger fish to fry, and our world has a lot bigger problems than who's wearing tattoos and whatnot. But I do want to mention this passage in 1 Timothy 2:8 in this context, because Paul says to Timothy, who he's teaching to raise up churches and everything, he says, women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works. God is far more interested in us adorning ourselves with good works of service to God than with clothes and hair and all the things he mentions here, and jewelry and tattoos and piercings. So these are kind of very low-level issues. The question is, okay, are you serving God? Are you glorifying God? Are you doing the good works? Okay, then these other things, if you're not doing them for the sake of vanity, you're free to dress and how you will. That's my answer.
Well, that's a sensible answer, and Jay's was as well. You don't take it to the nth degree, and that's where it's nice to have some freedom. If a person wanted to have a piercing and they weren't doing it to draw too much attention or a tattoo, then fine and dandy. But there are groups, as we well know, that you could be pretty much chastised for that. Jehovah's Witnesses have got a real issue with this. And, of course, they look at everything as being taboo. Most women will pierce their ears. I know I had 4 daughters, and, they were all Jehovah's Witnesses. And I thought about it, but I said, no, pierce your ears. But, I mean, if anyone ever walked into the Kingdom Hall with a nose ring, it would be terribly taboo. But thank you for your answer, Scott.